All right, we'll pick up with our elevation view of this master bath cabinet setup. I've actually already have all the parts cut up. There's some here, there's some there, and there's some over there. And all of this starts with a cut list. Turn it this way. And it'll tell you up top. So this is drawer. You see this is the cut list for drawer. It'll tell you the width of the material, and this is for the 2.25 inch style, 1.5 rail with a 1/2 inch tenon. Okay, these are all shaker style doors. There's also another sheet. These are our door panels. It'll just say flat square, 2.25 inch frame, 1/2 inch tenon. Okay, but notice they all say cut list for door, and cut list for door, but you have to look to see what the parentheses say. Now, one clue is you can look down here. All of our drawers, our rails, top and bottom rails for our drawers are going to have 1.5 inch width on them. Everything else will be 2 1/4. So our stiles for our drawers will be 2 1/4, but our rails will be 1.5 inch. Remember, this is so we can fit our pulls in on short upper drawers. They're typically, less than 6 inches. You'll notice for our doors, everything's 2 1/4 inches. Okay. A couple things we can do with this sheet. Number one, it lets us know what the total that we need to pull from. Notice we have 14.2 feet of 2 1/4 we'll need for our drawers. Remember, this is for our drawer fronts. So I'll take 14.2, I'll flip here, and I got another 37.3, and I'll add those together. And I usually add about 20% for waste, or just in case we make a miscut or something. So we'll need about 62 feet of 2 1/4, and I'll do the same thing for the 1.5 inch. So it's 30.9 times about 20%, and that gives us 37 feet of 1.5 inch. Now, material can be pulled from anywhere, but this particular job we need maple, and we need stain grade maple. I don't know that that's necessarily what was ordered, but you can pull out the better pieces that we have. Be careful you don't pull out poplar. Sometimes poplar can look like maple. For example, this sheet right here is poplar, and so is that. And notice the color difference. This is maple. That's maple. So you have to be careful sometimes when pulling things out of a scrap pile, or even when you're pulling them out of our stock pile. Now, once we have pulled our material off of the material and figured out the yield that we're going to need, or the amount of material we're going to need from our rough stock, and typically all that's 13/16. Make sure you check thickness. Do a spot check on thickness, especially if you're pulling from a scrap pile. Scrap pile here, scrap back there, or leftovers from something else. It's all great, but you need to make sure that the thickness is the same. So you might want to lay them down on the table if you're pulling stuff out of a scrap pile, and have a standard width that you're operating off of, and make sure everything's the same thickness. Move the piece down the board and make sure that it's the same thickness. You can't have different thicknesses when you're making doors. They all have to be the same thickness. And once we have our material, we'll set up our saw. I like to use this, I don't know where it went. We did have a knife that goes on the back of this. It's in here somewhere. There it is. So we'll put this behind the blade. It'll sit like that. You got to pull that metal plate out. But this helps keep that board from pinching right behind the blade and causing a lot of, prevent kickback, but it also prevents that ugly stuff. Okay. Full disclosure, I was using a fine tooth blade typically use just for ripping plywood, and I should have changed it out before I started, but I was lazy, and it was on its last leg anyway, so I was going to get through this, and then we changed it out after I got the pieces ripped. So you rip up what you need from your stock. You rip up the linear footage that you need here, and then you're going to go over and stage at the chop saw. Now, you got a fence. I usually set one up, cut it, check it before I do 15 of something. I want to check the first one to make sure that it's okay. Now, a few things that are on this sheet. Notice that this top line shows you the overall drawer front size. It's 35 and 11/16 wide, 5 and 15/16 inches high. That is not something you cut. This next line, notice it says panel, and it gives you dimensions. Your panel is actually going to be on a nest sheet. So you have two places you can get this. So the first two in each section is not something you're cutting up. So I'll typically go through and I'll just scratch through that to make sure I don't lose track of my numbers. A lot of numbers on here. So I'll scratch through those, making sure I don't look at the wrong number. Okay? And it's the same way. Notice there's a space, there's the next drawer size, and then there's the next panel, next drawer size, space, next drawer size, and then it goes down to your summary area. Okay? So I'll pull out my 2 1/4. I got 4 2 1/4 at 5 and 15/16. So what I'll do is I'll look down and say, okay, well, there's one that's 12 and 3/8. There's another 5 and 15/16. And there's another 5 and 15/16. How many of these 12 and 3/8 do I have? I've got 8 of those. I'm going to cut my longest lengths first. Okay, make sure you get those. So I'm going to cut 8 of those. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to go to the next longest board that I have in 2 1/4, and it looks like it's my 5 and 15/16. Nope, scratch that. I've got, nope, that's correct, 5 and 15/16. So I've got 4 there. I have 4 there. I have 4 there. That's a total of 12. So I've cut 12 pieces at 5 and 15/16. I've cut 8 at 12 and 3/8, and I'm done with my 2 1/4 on this sheet. Okay, that doesn't take very long. Then I go and I get my 1/2 inch stock, 1.5 inch stock. There's my 1.5 inch. Now notice on that it starts with the longest, and then it goes to the next longest. And there it is again. So we'll look at our numbers. 32 and 3/16. I got 2 and 2, so I'm going to cut 4 of those. Again, long pieces, you want to pick those first, and you want to pick your straightest sections. You do not want a wavy piece of wood cutting that. Cut 4 of those, label them. Come down to 17 and 5/16. So I got 4 and 4, that's 8 of those. But look, I got 2 and 2 down here. So that's 8, 2 and 2, that's 12. So I'm going to cut 12 sections of that. I'm going to label them. Oh, and I missed those. So that's 16 actually. I got to cut 16 at 5 and 15/16. Okay. All right. Scratch that. 32, 17 and 5/16. There's 8 there, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's it. 12 of those for 17 and 5/16. And what do I have left? Oh, here we go. I've got 1.5 inches. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 at 8 and 5/8. Now, what I do to make sure I have the right number of pieces is I'll add up the total number of pieces I have at 1.5 inches from these numbers. and I'll write it down. I'll add up the total number I have on this sheet from the 2 1/4, and I'll write it down. And when I get through cutting them, I'll separate them and I'll count them out. That way, that's one quality check to make sure I have all my pieces, because when I start cutting up the tenons and the dados, I do not want to have to go back and cut those things. It takes a while to set up. For your doors, same thing. All this is going to be 2 1/4, so it's a little bit easier. I got 24 15/16. Got 8 of those, 4 there, that's 12. Come back. Again, pick your straightest pieces for that 24 15/16. I come back, I've got 14 1/4. I got 1, 2 through 4, so that's 8 of those. And then I come down, I've got 8 5/8, I've got 4 of those. So I have 24 pieces total here. Again, I stack them up, count them, and check them to make sure I have all the pieces. All right, setting up for cutting our panels, and we'll this will be the last part of this video. Next part of the video we'll discuss, or the next video we'll discuss cutting the dados, or getting set up for the dado cuts, and making the tenons on your rails. So these panels, notice on these drawers, we want all of our grain to go vertical everywhere, okay? So you'll notice we've set this up where all the grain goes in the same direction. It's all vertical for all these pieces. That's a door panel, that's a door panel. Okay? And door panel, door panel, door panel, drawer front. Now when I go to rip this, I'm going to rip this section first. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to cross cut. It'll be over here. I don't want to mess up my whole leftover. I'll cross cut here. I'll probably go ahead and add 4 inches. So we'll just say we'll rip a section here 8 inches and set that to the side and come back and finish those up later. Then, so that's my number 2. My third cut is another rip for the rest of my drawer fronts, and then my fourth cut is another rip. Okay. Actually, at that time I may go ahead and cross cut what I got left here, so I'll have this big section left for something else. Okay.